I think we're live. I don't know if you wanted to.
Test. Chew. 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 Chew.
I think I will have to share
Test.
the link somewhere before anybody else shows.
Ham and eggs. Ham and eggs.
Okay, a little bit of volume I'm getting. Yeah, good.
We're getting the replay.
No, I fixed it just now. I've done this just a little while, so I sort of know what I'm doing. Let me. It says one watching now, but I'm pretty sure the one is us. So I'm going to go ahead and
I'm not watching.
share this on Parlor. Say that we are live. Yeah. Let's see. We're live now. And cool.
So do I have to do another test?
No.
Pest. Pest. Pest.
Okay, so we do have someone else here. Let us know if you can hear us fine out there on YouTube land.
Wait, I'll
Test. Chew. Chew.
see. You didn't get-
The person who is watching might not actually be logged in, so there's that issue as well. Let me go ahead and share this around a tiny bit. One other place, maybe. Whichever social media hasn't canceled this yet. What do you think? Are you waiting for yours?
What?
Yeah. Okay, got that. And then I think it's going. Okay, good. And get back over here. Okay. So yeah, we are going to start here in just 1 second. I'm going to share it one more place. We are going to talk this week about some positive developments as much as possible in what we're calling flattening the CronyCare curve. If you remember this piece that we put out a couple weeks ago, we have argued that what we're seeing during this pandemic is just sort of a further, what would you call it?
Well,
It's
the
a
analogy
further-
I was thinking of this morning is if you have an old house and so they started, say, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and they have all these obsolete systems and circuits, whether it's water or electricity. What tends to happen over the years is they solve issues by patches, and they never address the structural problems. And I think what we did with the CronyCare curve piece is show how much of the real problems the country is having with this virus is due to prior measures of the same kind.
Right.
And so we made an appeal to actually address the core of the problem and not to keep people sick with other patches. This is something that, well, you of course mentioned the positive news. I think the bad news is that certain groups, and obviously Pfizer is leading this project, but we saw still Governor Newsom announce even before they've actually obtained approval the obligatory vaccination of children as young as 5. And so I had another type of flashback, the fact that, and this is a lesson that, I assumed people had learned the fact how much the disinfectation of children's and of babies' environments has actually caused more trouble. You can think about the widespread use of baby formula,
Right.
which
Science. Yeah.
And then okay, I understand they didn't know at that point how
Right.
essential the
antibodies and things that women that the
you get
babies
through
get from the women.
mother's
Yeah.
milk. But at a certain point, if you don't allow children to become robust and to let their systems get adjusted to an actual real environment and not, in some sort of a lab situation, because of course you can think of a number of Larson jokes, with a child in sort of an aquarium or something. That in any event, so I thought these lessons were clear. And then what do they think this can lead to?
There's so much that we thought was clear, right? And mandating a treatment, vaccine, you call it what you think is appropriate, because there are debates about this, mandating this for children who have almost no risk at all from this disease, as far as we know, makes absolutely no logical sense. And already, not just, Newsom is drunk with power right now, as far as I can tell. He somehow escaped the recall election, which I'm not exactly sure how he did that, because there were so many people who actually signed the petition or were in favor of having the recall, and then only a small fraction of that actually voted to recall him. To me, it doesn't make any sense how that happened exactly, but it did happen. Maybe a whole bunch of people moved out of California. I don't know. I was one of those that said goodbye. So, he's drunk with power. He's announcing this before the FDA has even approved it for this age group. And we have to hope that there's some sanity over there, and maybe that they're going to hold back on the approval of this. But Newsom is ready to go. He is ready to mandate that your kids get vaccinated with this vaccine that does not have a long enough track record, in my opinion. In particular, if, I'm thinking about, you're going to vaccinate a kid, you want to know also what the effect on their reproductive systems is, not to mention the issues of myocarditis and all these other things. I would want to see a long track record of no problems with the reproductive systems of kids or younger people who have had this vaccination. The spike proteins, what is the effect of introducing those directly via, injection versus they get introduced to the body through mucous membranes and other things if you actually catch the coronavirus? You say, okay, you're giving a controlled dose and et cetera, but the mechanism of delivery is important, as we know in other areas as well. There are just so many questions, legitimate questions, that anybody who is thinking about this critically would have. And we're talking about people's bodies, their bodily integrity, the sovereignty over their own bodies, their right to choose, as people talk about. And suddenly the left, who has been in favor of the right to choose with respect to abortion and other things, is suddenly on this idea of mandating this vaccine that just doesn't have a track record yet, and as far as we know, might not even be necessary. And mandating it in kids, and think about, and again, there's people in our circles who think that you should not sacrifice any individual to any other individual.
No, that's
what I see with this is people
sort of a litmus test for whether your ID is valid at all.
Yeah. Does it involve the sacrifice of anybody? And I think this involves the sacrifice of children to adults who are scared about the effects of this virus on their health.
And even that, thing is, if you have issues with your immune system, if you have diabetes, if you're old per se, there's a number of situations in which the virus is dangerous. But for people who are healthy, let alone for adolescents, for children. There's simply no factual basis to require this. And
now kids have been getting less healthy, but they've been getting less healthy only because of the lockdown measures.
Well, not only, but then we return, of course, to the state of general health.
Right.
And of course, it's obvious that lockdowns, don't tend to make us healthier. On the contrary. So it's a very scared way of facing the future. I mean, of course, if you look at the environment as this pool full of germs, and I think there's actually is a technical term for that, right? For the syndrome where people start seeing filth and infection, and
I only just think of germophobia, but
okay, so yeah. Sure. And if you seriously suffer from that, it's a serious condition, because people become afraid to go out, to touch anything. They have to carry all sorts of products with them if they do have to go out, etc. So imagine a whole culture becoming subject to it. It's that in itself I find scary, because it's not a sensible way of leading your life.
So this doesn't make sense. I'll tell you something that I saw this morning, not long before the show, and I was running around because I had gotten a bit distracted by the fact that this video existed. We almost don't have to be here, right? If you remember, well, I mean, I think we do, because there's some discussion and explanation that we can have. But remember when we interviewed Professor Desmet a couple weeks ago, that he was talking about one of the things that we can do to wake people up, to show them the logical contradictions that are out there, and just to start them thinking critically about this, more critically about what's going on. Mm-hmm. One of the things he mentioned was the use of humor, right?
Of course.
Right. And this morning I saw something that is perfection. I mean, it is just perfection. JP Sears, who, I mean, he's always been good. Although sometimes it's funny. Sometimes some of the videos, I think it's not even funny, and it's just sad. So it's true, and it's sad, and it's horrifying, and it's not funny anymore. The one this morning is this great balance of both humor and just rich in terms of containing all of the logical contradictions, exposing all of the logical contradictions. So
spoil too much.
No. But everybody go take a look at it. It's called Why Life Jackets Should Be Mandatory. So that gives you an idea of what you're in for. Why life jackets should be mandatory over at JP Sears. So do that after you watch us. But the fact that
you can do it on a separate device,
I guess, but then, go do it now. No, it's a few minutes, but it's excellent. And I just love that people like him exist, who are putting their full creative efforts and talents to this task, right? Just going out there and trying to spread the word about this issue. It is serious. Okay, I saw a video, clip of Tucker Carlson, and Carlson has been digging into this $3.5 trillion monstrosity of a spending bill, which I don't know what sort of version of it is going to end up passing or not. The last I heard is that the Republicans...
Parenthetically, spending bills like that sort of remind me of getting the children vaccinated, because the children are going to foot the bill, right? Anyway,
it's true. I mean, again, it's another example of sacrificing the younger generation to the older. And but nowhere in the world so far have we seen such a stark example of sacrificing the younger to the older in demanding that children get this particular vaccine for this particular illness that has such a low risk profile for them. I just don't I can't even imagine this is happening.
Excuse
It's
my
right.
interruption.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So, on the bill, right? What, there is, I think he said page 168 of a 2,700 page bill, right? 25 or 2,700 pages of how they're going to spend our money or money that doesn't exist, maybe that will never exist, right? Anyway, page 168, it talks about the penalties that are going to be imposed upon businesses that don't follow the mandate according to whatever OSHA regulation he's trying to push through to make everybody do this. And apparently for every unvaccinated employee, they plan if this legislation passes, they're going to try to fine those businesses $700,000 for every single employee who is unvaccinated. And he compared that, yes, there are things that make, employers pay for hazards that they've created or whatever. And I can't remember the exact example, but it was some horrific accident where somebody dies or multiple people died. And in that case, they fine the business only $12,000.
Yeah. So.
What is going on here, right? And there has been speculation, and then maybe at a certain granular level, there's a truth to it or not, or whatever, that the people who don't want to get vaccinated are more likely to be Republicans. So, and especially the business owners who are more likely to resist this are going to be more of the conservative businesses. And there is, of course, a whole sort of culture of conservative businesses. Do they want to bankrupt these is the idea, right? Do they want to bankrupt them? They want to take away the livelihoods of either Republicans or just people who don't want to comply.
Well,
right?
Well,
look, Brett is here. Hey, Brett and Gail. Sorry, we should have said hi long ago, but we're already yammering. So, yes.
So it's rather compliance, I think. That is the point, because it is in no way proportional to the actual risks involved.
No.
And that's, that goes to the very heart of the how ridiculous this whole campaign, this whole push for mandates is. The fact that if those vaccines were as wonderful as they're purported to be, then of course we can name a whole series of countries where it would all be under control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there would be no need whatsoever, not for the booster shots. Anyway, what we end up with is this totally incoherent mishmash of half arguments, where now it's the kids.
And again, that JP Sears video is perfect at describing them. But so you're saying now it's the kids, and that's the thing that's so inexplicable to me, is why, and again, even in people who say that they're not for sacrificing anybody to anybody else, to so eagerly talk about vaccinating kids. I'm hoping that at least that is going to be a stopping point for some of the people who are in the more freedom-oriented communities. They're going to say, look, the risk-benefit profile just doesn't exist for kids.
So let me try to rephrase that in response, because this is something that was one of my main takeaways from the interview with Professor De Smet. That it turns out that people you thought you had you got an intellectual agreement with about things that you hold to be important or even fundamental, that apparently we don't necessarily see eye to eye in this situation, where people become literally hypnotized through fear. And I would also say, he insists on the endemic anxiety that was already prevalent. I would say also lack of sense making in people's lives.
Right.
In any event, so they might not be people from, say, your movement who are open to a message such as that. Maybe there may be people with a religious background who see much more clearly how the freedom of conscience and the self-determination with your body and the idea that you cannot be forced to let your children undergo this kind of thing. It might be easier with people like that to come to an understanding and to ally in a sense on this issue.
Right. I want to talk about one more, sort of elaboration on the CronyCare curve, as I'm calling it, because there is one big piece of information that came out this week that supports our thesis that this univocal vaccine as savior narrative is a product of crony relationships that are going on. And again, this is not capitalism, right? I've spoken with people who say, oh, people don't want to admit that the activity of big corporations or even big corporations in alliance with government is to blame for this. They don't even want to go down that hole because they think that capitalism will be to blame. But make no mistake about it, this is not capitalism. This is cronyism. This is why on this show, you won't hear me use the phrase crony capitalism. There is no such thing, right? There is cronyism, there is capitalism. And what we're seeing today is pure cronyism. Let me give you the example that came out just in the last day or so. It turns out that Merck is trying to get on the fast track for an emergency use authorization, an antiviral that some experts are touting as the only antiviral treatment for COVID.
Whereby they would obtain such emergency approval.
Right. So that's the other thing. Of course, they're trying to get an emergency use authorization for it. They have some small study that they, say, oh yes, this definitely proves that it's great. And I think they say that
it's a single study, right?
A single study, and apparently it's not very well designed. And it shows that there's a 50% reduction in likelihood of hospitalization if you were to take Merck's new, very expensive drug.
Oh yeah,
very expensive.
$700.
Right. Now, if you recall, a few weeks ago, there was a statement released by Merck where they said, oh, unfortunately, the drug that we produced originally, that we patented, but it's no longer in patent, that got a Nobel Prize, the developers got a Nobel Prize for developing it. This drug, unfortunately, is not effective against COVID-19. Now, we know that there's the example of Uttar Pradesh, is that how you pronounce it?
As far as my Indian goes.
Okay, so I don't know, but there's a whole province in India that was protected completely without vaccines and with ivermectin.
Well, they had a vaccination rate of 5%.
5%.
5%.
Go look at the case counts in Uttar Pradesh right now. And that is due to the presence of ivermectin, the ubiquitous presence of ivermectin distributed by the government in Uttar Pradesh. Okay. And you tell me that that's not enough of Mill's method of difference to tell you that there is a there with respect to ivermectin. But no, Merck, they have a study. If you actually dig into the funding of the study, you see that one of the principal scientists who was the author of the study did have funding from Merck. And then there's other people, of course, that were funded by other crony stakeholders, cronies, Janssen, and then
GlaxoSmithKline.
Yeah, GlaxoSmithKline as well. Anyway, this, was out there. And then lo and behold, a couple weeks later, their new antiviral that's only going to cost you $700, multiples of the price of you getting a dose of ivermectin, even today, where the supply of ivermectin has been choked off to such an extent that if you're going to obtain ivermectin, it's way more expensive than it surely was for, in India to distribute to everybody. It's supposed to be what, pennies or a few dollars to give people a full course of ivermectin. And I'm seeing prices of 70 or more.
Well, so of course, there's a difference between what it used to be. And so there are also studies on Central Africa where there's a historical connection with ivermectin. Of course, how prices develop is also dependent on market forces. So,
there's
demand.
always people who will take
advantage. There was an Israeli doctor. This was half a year ago, who thought that there was a possibility for a 5-day cure with ivermectin for COVID, and I think the cost he projected was $1 a day. So yeah, so that's different from $700 for your cure, or the other options that are still allowed to speak of.
Right.
And again, that is what is most worrying.
Well, the most worrisome thing about this, of course, is that it's Merck. And so that we find out, even though they did this press release and, they're saying, oh, yes, we'd love to take credit for our success of our previously released drug, that it could be repurposed for such an important thing. And, it's too bad. Yeah. And then weeks later, they come out with their new drug. They're going to make a lot of money. So, and then moreover, we find that there's an expert who's very respected as biosecurity studies and everything else, who has been for weeks criticizing the use of ivermectin, criticizing the people who would use it, criticizing lawyers who have helped people fight for the right to try ivermectin when they're sick with COVID, right? And then we just learned that this person is a Merck stockholder on the board of something with Merck, and basically tied up with Merck, and only disclosed it when he was happily announcing the new drug from Merck, and didn't bother to announce the conflict of interest, the patent conflict of interest that existed when he was out there speaking against ivermectin, which is a valid competitor for that drug, regardless of even whether he thinks it's actually not as good as the Merck drug. It doesn't matter. He needs to disclose if he's going to be scientific.
So you made an interesting observation the other day, saying that in other professions, say in law, which is at least one of your fields.
Sorry.
There are very clear rules, that is laws, on
there's rules
how
ethics,
to avoid conflict of interest.
Yes.
And
avoid or manage, right? Because so there's all kinds of elaborate rules because it is the case, of course, that there's only so many big law firms or qualified law firms who specialize in X field. And then probably if you're looking for some particular type of service, then there's going to be very few that you can choose from. And the likelihood that the one that you're choosing is not going to have any conflicts at all is kind of ridiculous. But here are all the ways that you handle the conflicts. And I don't know how formal the conflicts rules are when they're talking about, that when you see these papers, that these research papers that are published, that they have to disclose any financial interests that they have. But, for instance, if an expert is going on television all the time or being quoted in articles calling ivermectin a bogus drug, what would ethics say that person would have to disclose about the fact that they are an investor, board member associated with a company that's going to be releasing a competing drug? And, again, if they're going for emergency use authorization, then part of the case they have to make is that there are no other available
alternatives.
treatments.
And that's really it's revulsifying. It's revulsifying. And
I'm glad you like that word. That was my mom's word. Yeah.
Well,
carrying on the tradition.
I'm glad I found a proper occasion to use it.
Yeah.
Though, of course, not so glad.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess under hypnosis, you can do these outrageous things. And of course,
No, I mean,
of course,
I'm sure he would
yeah,
argue that he
of
thinks
course.
he's doing the right thing all the
Yeah,
way
well,
through.
let's leave him aside because I hope he'll have to answer for this. But in any event, what makes the situation all the graver is the fact that, as per the Trusted News Initiative, people are deprived of this type of critical question.
Mhm.
So the press, under the guise of protecting people, they're actually forgetting their fundamental obligation, which defines their role in a free society to inform the people, whatever the consequences. And so now, it is their overt purpose to withhold distribution from anything that might cast doubt on anything regarding the vaccines.
Anything that encourages people to think for themselves about these issues is being suppressed. And, this week there was the announcement that they were going to do it for anti-vax material generally. But what a week for them to announce that it's going to be anti-vax generally. Then that just gives them more of an excuse to suppress information questioning this particular vaccine. Of course, there is stuff on YouTube that is getting through and is still questioning the vaccine, how long it's going to remain up. I don't know. A lot of people have been going over to Rumble. If I ever get taken down off of YouTube, go find me on Rumble. So we have Param, and we also have Jonathan and Stephen, who I have not seen in my chat before. So welcome, you guys. Actually, Brett, I don't know if I've seen Brett here. Yeah, he says, reminds me of the person who investigated the lab leak theory in China. There is cronyism from top to bottom in this. And again, that was the topic of our piece. I suspect that as the weeks go on, we will be seeing more evidence of this, and we'll point it out when it is. We don't want to wallow in it too much. We do want to start talking about some of the bright, sort of points of things that we can use to have a little bit of hope. One is, like I said, Tucker is digging into that bill and speaking out and exposing this $700,000 fine, $700,000 for each employee that you don't mandate that they are vaccinated. It is a non-compliance tax.
Okay. So here's this, because there's our latest, our latest piece on the CronyCare. Of course, there was a previous one, and how much of this is also using private actors as an extension, right?
Yes.
Because you slap a fine on them that is impossible to deal with,
right?
And so you outsource the enforcement.
Okay, so let me
private actors.
And this is perfect. This is perfect, right? Okay, because this allows us to go a little bit deeper into this issue of the state action versus not state action, and what vehicle is the best way to challenge a particular instance of state action. And we have argued in the past controversially that Trump's lawsuit against social media is appropriate, that a lot of what social media is doing these days, because they're doing it in coordination with government agencies, with their express wishes. We've seen it with Jen Psaki saying, we're telling Facebook what's misinformation and what isn't.
And then a couple of weeks later, you see Facebook with their ads.
Yeah.
We want regulation.
Right?
As long as we have a say in what they're going to look like.
Yeah, no, it's all crony. It's all crony.
Mm-hmm.
So we've argued that in that particular case, that the proper vehicle for challenging it is a private lawsuit. And I've also argued that with respect to dealing with our crony healthcare system, I don't know if you can call it healthcare anymore, the hospital system and everything else, it's all taken over by this mix of corporations working in conjunction with socialists and government. Okay, that's what's going on in healthcare. I've argued that the private lawsuits where people are desperately trying to get ivermectin for them, their loved ones, whatever, and the hospitals won't give it. I say, no, yeah, in a normal situation, if you have a private hospital, if you have a free market, you're not going to be having the law tell them what sort of treatment they have to give or not. You let the free market decide. We are not in a free market in healthcare. And again, there's a lot of people who travel. He likes to call it only my intellectual circles. We can have that debate another day, but whatever, people who agree with me, who have been in the objectivist circles, they heard as much as I did back in 1993, I believe, Leonard Peikoff, Healthcare is Not a Right, great speech. They know government has been involved for decades, that Obamacare was a big leap towards socialized medicine. Probably they're setting the seeds to try to mandate a takeover of the entire system now, because they're making all these healthcare workers quit with the mandate. Okay, let's go on. But the point is that it is not a free market system. I think a private lawsuit is appropriate there in challenging this. But let me finish, because I'm connecting it. I'm so sorry I'm long-winded, but I have an important point to connect this to here. So Stephen is talking about the fact that there's a representative here in Texas, Chip Roy, who has introduced a bill that would prevent OSHA and other agencies from imposing fines on either individuals or businesses that don't comply with Biden's proposed COVID-19 mandate. And so then the issue is, because in other situations, I have said, I'm not sure that I think it would be great for state government to get involved, that I think a private lawsuit would be better, because again, the state governments have put forth legislation saying, let's tell Facebook or Twitter what they can or can't do with respect to censorship. And I have backed off endorsing anything like that. I have been hesitant about the use of antitrust. Certainly I've backed off or said, no, I don't endorse the expansion of antitrust legislation, right? It's a horrible time, and you have to pick out, what vehicles of action are available to you, because, we don't want to go to Revolutionary War kind of stuff. We're trying to do this within the legal system. So what's the best avenue within the legal system? Private lawsuits, I think, are the perfect vehicle when you are dealing with an entity that should be a private actor on a free market, but is not, that is acting in a crony capacity. So these are your hospitals today, these are your social media, et cetera. In this particular case, what Chip Roy and others, I hope there's going to be more who join him, what they're proposing to do is they are doing exactly what state governments are supposed to do, which is protect us from violation of our individual rights by the federal government. It is part of our traditional system of checks and balances, and it's exactly right. So do you see the difference, right? So I'm saying that in certain situations, I would endorse private lawsuits as the sort of way to get in and deal with an acute problem in a way that will just surgically remove a cancer, which is this cronyism, and redress whatever grievances arise from the cronyism. Because the whole goal is to not create further entanglement between government and private entities. We're trying to disentangle. And so if you're dealing with a hospital, if you're dealing with a Facebook or Twitter or whatever, the private lawsuits, I think, are the perfect vehicle there to surgically remove this cronyist cancer. But Chip Roy, thank you, because that is what state governments are supposed to do. If it is the federal government directly coming down and violating the individual rights of citizens of a state, it's part of our systems of, system of checks and balances, which of course is necessary, because even if our Constitution had been perfect, and it was not, there are always people who can get corrupted. And so it is one of the ways
and people who corrupt, because if you do want to announce this discussion, on from either side of the moat of the movement, etc., I'd say that what is rather harmful. So if you look at this discussion from the left-right perspective, traditionally, you can see some debate on principle, of course, as to everybody is entitled to healthcare, and the other side, no, it should be your individual choice and your individual liberty to choose, etc. But what, of course, has increasingly happened is that left and right represent pressure groups. So the left has unions and there are other interest groups, and then the right, reflexively or otherwise, they defend corporations. And corporations can be wrong, and in this whole situation, we all know how lousy the track record is at certain corporations, especially in certain sectors. So how are you going to disassemble a rotten system like that if you're not willing to address the culprits? So I think that really eventually and ultimately really harms our battle against this this crony system. That it becomes, people are led to engage in the debate as a fight between interest groups, and then of course nobody is interested any longer in taking it apart.
Right, and that reminds me of another JP video which he has, which is brilliant. He has one called "The Insanity of Picking a Side." Everybody, you're always asked to pick a side and to sit there and actually think critically about the issue and not necessarily agree with one side or other that you're being demanded. And I want to remind, because this was coming up to me while you were speaking, Trump started the crony relationship that gave rise to the vaccine issue that we have right now, right? He started Operation Warp Speed. He presumably engaged in the secret contract with Pfizer that our government is still apparently under the sway of. Otherwise, why would we be buying, hundreds of thousands of doses of a vaccine that is inferior to the Moderna product, for example? It makes absolutely no sense, right? So this was started by Trump. This is not an issue of, and people do say that if you question the vaccines, then you must be for Trump or something. I am on the record all over the place as a never Trumper. And again, remind you, this is really the swamp. This is really establishment politicians. This is when you go back and you say, oh, Trump, remember that you promised to drain the swamp and you didn't. So many politicians say that they're going to drain the swamp and they don't. No,
because they want the money from the swamp. For
the money, the power,
re-election.
We don't know the pressures. All we know is that it is getting ridiculous, the extent to which they are expecting compliance according to a narrative that makes no sense. And that's what we would try to wake people up to. So one piece of good news, yes, states who are willing, of course, there are individual businesses who are willing to stand up against this, but how much can they afford to go on at $700,000 a person? So they do need top cover. They do need those state governments to help protect them against the federal government. Because one thing we know is that the federal government, if it's going to go after you, they have unlimited resources, your own tax dollars, to go after you. And if you think that if one individual standing alone is going to defeat the federal government, it's very rare indeed. But with all of us speaking out together can. So other pieces of good news that we've seen this week, of course, we have both Norway and Singapore returning to life as normal, saying that we're going to accept the reality that COVID is something that you live with. And in Norway in particular, they've
pandemic to endemic, basically. And, it's a breath of realism. Instead of pretending that vaccinating more and more and getting boosters and the fourth one and the fifth one.
The example of Harvard was ridiculous. It was 90 plus vaccinated, and then they still had all these cases,
Yeah.
and then they shut down classes. So
Yeah.
Norway, Singapore both said enough is enough. We accept that it's endemic. And Norway in particular
We
had
have to
these beautiful
get back to living.
celebrations.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been, if you've been only on Facebook or Twitter, you are not seeing the whole story. And I don't know how much you've seen the celebrations in Norway, but that is a thing of beauty. In Singapore, I don't know that it's quite as stark a departure from the narrative. It's not quite as definitive, but it's very realistic, very matter of fact, where they're saying that the virus is going to be here.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, they're ramping up their healthcare capacity for a short time, and then after that, they're just letting the training wheels off.
The very elevated vaccination rate.
Exactly.
So it's they're not a developing country or anyway.
No.
Very high rate of vaccination. So
here's a question for you.
For me.
Yeah. So why is Norway and Singapore, to take two examples, and there are some other countries too. I mean, Sweden's been their eyes have been open the whole time.
Okay, yeah.
Denmark's, their eyes have been open the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we in the United States so cowed by this apparently? And why is our leadership in US? You always think US is the greatest and freest country in world history, et cetera, et cetera. And we're under this, where we're having to fight this. Australia is in a really bad way. But why are these other countries seeing the light first and just accepting this?
Maybe what helps either is that they're culturally a bit outliers, and so more used to going their own way. I imagine that this helps. But another possible explanation would be to refer to Professor De Smet again. And now, mind you, I don't have the data available in this with respect to the psychopharmaceuticals in Norway or Singapore, but of course, the level of anxiety in the US is pretty bad. The level of obesity in the US is pretty bad. So I think, at least in that regard, you can see that this type of narrative has a big impact on people. And I think once you have allowed for this disconnect, that is that you acknowledge that there is not necessarily a proportional or logical link between the data that that become available as we proceed, and measures that are actually taken. So once you acknowledge that there is some sort of a disconnect there, there has to be a different explanation. And so, of course, in their cases, they're simply, they have their feet that much closer to the ground. They're acknowledging what is obvious, what has been obvious for at least half a year. It's going to be endemic, and we can live with it. And sure, if you're old, you have certain health issues, it is a matter of concern, and you have to take precautions. Whether those precautions are just vaccination, you would have to wonder, especially considering that the immunodepressed are not helped by vaccines the way it was hoped. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. I'm just saying you have to face the facts and act accordingly. And creating these dream patterns of if only we reach 98% vaccination, it will go away. It will magically go away. that's very much, you keep postponing this goalpost, and the whole goal becomes vaguer and vaguer. So in the end, the only thing that is established is your ritual, because all these measures have something of the ritual to them.
No, yeah. All you have to do is wash your hands and put your mask on and get your shot, and everything will be okay.
Keep your distance.
Yeah.
Do not engage in certain social activities. Of course, the whole idea of essential versus non-essential professions, right? So apparently, we're just we're just flesh, and we have no essential things to keep our minds engaged, right? Because a book is not essential.
You're allowed to have
art is not essential, and so on and so forth. So it's a very cold way of looking at people. Plus, it's a perspective that necessarily tends towards, let's say, the social engineering way of looking at people. Whereas if you talk about your health, normally that's a discussion you have between you, the patient, or the let's hope you're still healthy, and your doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a problem, you talk to your doctor and you work out
what the best
treatment is.
Because that was one of the things I did when I was going to decide to take the vaccine, right? Is talk with my doctor.
To your own doctor.
My doctor also got the Moderna vaccine himself, and again, we're in early days with this, where, if there's someone and you trust who themselves has medical knowledge and got the same vaccine that you're thinking of getting, that makes you feel that much better, right?
You'd also expect him to follow the literature as it becomes available.
Right.
But anyway, as this situation all over the world has become a matter of immunologists and virologists, so they don't reason the same way, because they're
trained to look at the level of a population.
Exactly. Yeah. So it necessarily becomes this discourse on rates and demographics, and if we extend it, if we bring it down to 12, if we bring it down to 5, what is the model? What will it say? What will it do? And so I think it is a bit of a creepy effect, whereby we see that these ideas of sacrificing the whole becomes implicitly acceptable,
right.
And we should all
that's
pause.
We definitely need to hold back. That is the question that people should keep having in their minds going forward. Again, the mandates for children to be vaccinated in California, they've been announced already. They're not here yet. It hasn't even been approved yet. But
so what's he going to say?
Actually, it is in effect.
If they don't get the approval, huh?
It is in effect for 16 and up or whatever right now already, right? And I think that's wrong. And you've got a kid who's out there being the poster boy for it in San Diego, and it turns out he individually is immunocompromised.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he wants everybody else around him vaccinated.
Yeah, but it doesn't even help him.
Well, it does help him in the sense that the people around him are going to respond better to the vaccine than he will, right? So what you're doing,
that was an assumption.
It highlights the altruism. It highlights the altruism.
But it was the assumption now that all these they call them breakthrough cases, but it's common.
Yeah.
You mentioned the example of Harvard yourself.
No. Yeah, so, there's tons of cases there. But the point is it is sacrifice, and people need to pause why they're doing it. We have to go in a couple minutes.
My point is a different one. I think you create fake safety. which is really worse than telling people you're on your own. Because if
Yes.
you're telling somebody who's immunodepressed, and so it has been was evinced by serious research that logically their immune systems do not respond to the nudge that the vaccine is supposed to do, and this was valid for a number of vaccines. So if it doesn't work that way, then the idea was, so maybe overall, if you cordon off somebody by vaccinating a bigger number of people. So that was an assumption.
Right.
And with that assumption, I figured, yeah, sure. I don't mind, tilting towards that choice. Right. If I help others, why would I mind? But then, of course, if you discover that it doesn't work, how does more of the same help those people? And I think it's another example of creating false security, which is way more dangerous than telling the facts the way they are.
No, and that is the thing. I don't think that we are getting accurate information as to how effective these vaccines are, either in protecting the person vaccinated, in generally preventing any kind of spread, right? And this issue of the potential mutation of the virus that could be facilitated by the vaccine, that's a little bit disturbing as well. Thanks, Michael Garrett is there in the chat. He says there are a few doctors who are independent still.
Tell us about it, Michael.
Yeah, no, we definitely, and those are few and far between, and we value them. So we have to go pretty quick here. I wanted to alert you to a couple things. I did a couple interviews on the CronyCare topic earlier this week, end of last week. So I was on Louis B. Free, Chicago's Morning Answer, and then also Lars Larson in the last week. And then
personally,
also,
I was on my blog, which doesn't sound as fancy, but I had a great time.
He's got a good blog post to go check out, definitely. And it brings a historical perspective to a lot of this, because he's studying Bernard Mandeville, and Mandeville, the studies that he engaged in and some of the theorizing that he did is stuff that you could say is, yes, still relevant today. So tell him the name of your blog.
I called it the endemic.
No, the name of your blog generally.
Okay, yeah. What is it?
Isn't it History Is Now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I have to.
History is now, but I think if you Google or DuckDuckGo with the endemic hypo, you should land there, because I haven't seen the.
And hypo stands for not hypothetical, but.
You'll find out when you get there.
Okay.
No.
When I see hypo as an abbreviation, I think it's hypothetical.
Yeah, well.
I think that's what it means.
So it's not.
Okay. So go check that out. The other thing to check out is something that was released this week, is a short documentary by Prager University called Restricted, and I happen to be in there. I feel like I don't look like myself because of the way that they did the makeup and lighting, but sure enough, that was me. That was a few months ago, talking about the takedown of Parler by crony interests. So definitely fitting. I was talking to someone this week, a colleague of mine, about the state of everything and saying, what do we do? And he says, well, we start a social media platform. And indeed, that's exactly what I do over at Parler. Full disclosure, I have a bias towards a network that actually allows freedom of expression.
Are they paying you?
They do.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Whole First Amendment we allow on Parler. But anyway, I wanted to say a shout out again to JP Sears for what he did on Restricted. He did an excellent job. He's really the highlight for me of the whole video, and I was very happy to be on with him, as well as Dave Rubin and Brian Americh, who was the very brave talented engineer. Facebook, to the extent it has glitches, I always blame it on the departure of Brian Americh, a talented engineer whom Facebook lost because he decided that He did not want to work for a company that had become such a rabid, singular political culture that basically anybody who didn't agree with the political leanings of a bunch of the majority, which was kind of a leftist political slant, that those people ended up being vilified in their jobs, that they actually suffered in terms of the ability to perform their jobs and career advancement at Facebook. And he left because he didn't want to be part of that. He is excellent in this documentary, Restricted, as well. So check it out. And then this coming week, I'm going to talk there's a podcast that I'm doing Monday, something for Red State. And that's about the congressional hearings that we saw in this last week. There were a couple of these show hearings that they did. Again, one of them on the topic of privacy, another one on the topic of harm towards younger people, harm due to Instagram, platforms like that. What is done in terms of psychological health to these kids. And you'll hear my take on that this coming week. Okay. So thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're here and you haven't clicked like yet, we appreciate all the likes, the shares, the subscribe, all of that we appreciate. And we will see you next week at the same time. I think next week, hopefully, Rob Wolf, I'm wearing the Healthy Rebellion t-shirt, which you can sort of see here. I think he's going to be here next week and talk to us a little bit about his ideas for flattening the CronyCare curve. So take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And look out for good news too. Look out for clarifying information and good news.